Okay, this is 7/16 20 thread. So this here is the new tap here. Well, not new, but good one. So this goes in, it spins in a little bit, goes in about halfway, and it stops. So we'll just take my crescent wrench and do this by hand. You can hear it cutting a little bit there. So whatever's in there is pretty crappy. Makes it look a little bit better. Looks like he's got a bunch of sand and puke and dirt on there. So I didn't want to cut. Doesn't matter how many times you blow this stuff off. If you got grit in the threads, they don't go in. Okay, that looks good. So let's go ahead and check this one here while we're at it. There it goes. Okay, that one screwed right in, no problem. Alright. Should get all the sand and grit out of here. Feel it. Okay, let me get back to our float. Okay. Let's see. Guess what I forgot? Thought I got the gasket. So there's my needle hanging out the bottom. So we'll just go back in there and catch it again. Of course, I knocked it right off the top over there. Yeah. Trying to get it where I can show you what I'm doing, but it's hard to do. Looking inside of a dark hole. Now on the older ones there's no seal on this. On the newer ones they put a little O-ring, little flat gasket in here. So me, I like to just tighten them down, have more thread area, screw the gasket. Okay, I'll make sure that works freely. Seems to be working freely. Okay, I had to move the float over to the right here a little bit so it wouldn't drag on the side of the float bowl over here. And you want to make sure that it doesn't front to back is good, so we're not hitting on anything. The other thing is you look at if it's twisted. And the last thing you look at is the float height. So we're supposed to be a 1/4 inch down, and we're 5/16 down or so at least. Okay, so it looks like this is pretty close, and the pin's not worn out so bad it's going to drag. It's loose, but it's not going to drag anything. So now we go ahead and take it apart and tighten the float up all the way this time. The needle doesn't want to come out. Figures. There it goes. So don't force it, just wiggle out and let it fall on its own. Okay, now I'm going to have to support the nut here with a crescent wrench, or the appropriate size, whichever that is. And you tighten the screw down without breaking the float. So it's kind of a judgment call there because you've got a lot of compressing going on. But right now it's nice and tight, not moving anywhere. So we're looking pretty good. Now I need to move the float up a little bit. So if you look at it, it's kind of a downhill angle right now. Oop. So there, get where we can get to it. See how it's downhill on this side? So I want to bring it up just a little bit. So I'm going to take a little pair of channel locks and pull it up with that. Got my big pair of channel locks here instead of my small pair. And these are too big to use, so I get my small pair. There's a small pair. Okay, now that supports it on the screw and the nut. So you can see how it pulls evenly on all the way around, so it doesn't bind on anything. We're not hitting on the back side of the float over here. So now I can take this lever and I just bend it up a little bit. Okay, again where you can see it. So now it's higher on this side and is lower, so hopefully that was enough. We'll find out in a minute. So I go ahead and put it together. Oh, wrong gasket. This might take 3 or 4 times to get it right, but you don't want to be yanking on this float too hard because you'll break the float. And there it goes, popped in. Make sure you get the bushing on the other side of the float bowl there. Okay, we tighten that one down. We tighten this one down here. That should be enough. Heard the torque wrench go off at my elbow. And I bent it a little bit too far. So now you see the float is through there pretty far. I don't know where. Try to get this where you can see with the float, with the angle. See, it should be there, not up there. So I overbent it. So I try to bend it down, but I can't reach it, so we'll take it back apart. And we go halfway in between. As usual, I get a little bit carried away. It happens a lot. Okay, same tool. Okay. Bend it again. In the hole or not? Yeah, I think it is. Hard to tell. Yep, it's in. Okay, so now you look at it in there. See, you're about a 1/4 inch down. You kind of let gravity do it. So you want to make sure it all works nice and freely with gravity. Here, working. Can't see it because I'm on the other side, but so that's how you do it. Just make sure it works. So you want to take your finger, put it over here, make sure it's not rubbing. You go over here, do the same thing. So you want to kind of center it up. You can just lightly pull in on it. You want to make sure it doesn't hit anywhere in the float bowl. It's top, bottom, side to side. So this one's working good. And you can see how we're a 1/4 inch down right there. So we're pretty good. Now one way you know the float's in there correctly is see how it's pretty even all the way around the whole float. That's what you want to see. Alright, so we got that in there. Now remember the spray nozzle is held in by this spring, so if you have this upside down, it'll fall all apart. And you want to make sure you use the correct spring on here too, because if you put too much tension on it, you can break the float. And not enough, it rattles, so it's a trade-off. Okay. Now usually these things are offset to on the main jet side, not the low speed jet side. Now in the early 30s it was on the low speed side, but everything after that it was on the other side. Now I usually like putting the soft part of this gasket toward the float bowl and the all copper side against the nut. Now this nut does not have a stud on the bottom for some reason, I'm not sure why. But that's what he was using, so for now we'll leave it that way. Now we're not exactly sure where this is going to sit, so you have to adjust this after you get the carburetor back on your bike. But usually it's somewhere about in this area here, is where it belongs. And I just tighten this up with a crescent wrench. And you want to make sure you're not yanking on the needle over here, or pushing this against the side of the bench or something. And you're going to have to retorque this a couple times on the bike because the gasket's going to give. That's our initial torque. Okay, now being a flathead float bowl, the bowl's exposed over here, so you got a little wash or a little nut that goes on top. Now there's no kind of a seal on this thing. It's not supposed to have gas this high up in here. You want to make sure the float's still working. Hear it? Okay. So we just lightly torque this here down. That should be enough. Alright, so it's starting to look like a carburetor. One thing now is I got to do the choke side over here, but I don't have the parts right now for doing that. Now the screws that go over here, excuse me, these are 1224, which is a Harley thread. It's an old machine standard thread back in the teens and 20s and 30s. So these are the screws I'm going to put in here for him to have. He has a little aftermarket air cleaner that he had 1/4 threads in his carburetor body. So I'm going to make sure that he has the correct hardware here. Otherwise he'll have to butcher the body to make it work, which we do not want to do because we spend all the time fixing the body. So I'm going to go ahead and put all the correct screws in here. There's a little drag on it for some reason. I'm not going to tighten these too much because I want to dig up the body just enough that they don't fall out. Alright, so that's all done on that part. So now we're just a matter of coming up with the choke mechanism to go in here. So I'll have to finish it up tomorrow. And my high-speed needle's in back drying. I had to go paint it. Forgot to. So that's where we're at for now. I also need to see about tightening this up a little bit up in here, some more washers. So I'll play around with that a little bit, but this is all pretty much junk parts, so I don't spend too much time on it. But I'll tighten up a little bit for the guy. So then he can either attempt to use it the way it is or buy the correct lever and everything, fix the problem. So for now that's where we're at on that. Now these here are the two correct Harley gaskets. These are actually original military ones. So for some reason they give you two, you only use one. So I'm going to give him two so he'll have a spare. So we'll make sure he has these. So anyway, that's where we're at for now. We'll finish this up tomorrow.